The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Love news but find keeping up a bit overwhelming? Well, Newsable is the answer. It's your daily fix of everything worth talking about. I'm your host, Imogen Wells, and in about 15 minutes, I'll bring you what you need to know from Aotearoa and around the world and explain why it matters. Newsable tackles the big stuff without taking itself too seriously. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
This podcast loves to chat to people at different stages of business, and today's entrepreneur has experienced a lot of those stages. He hails from Wellington and from a diverse background, running some of their best bars and cafes, their orchestra, and where he is now a director of a company that's making an impact in the way juice can be made without leaving a bad impact on the world. Their brand of almighty organic veggie and fruit juices also help more gardens get grown, with 3 cents from each bottle going into gardens at schools that they then go and get their hands dirty with. A cool idea, and Adàn Tijerina, thank you for joining us here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, how did you come to set up Almighty? What leads a fellow into organic and special juices?
Well, I have a history and I suppose a bit of a knack of following my nose, really. And for me, it was born out of my a partnership, a business partnership with Ben Leonard and a fair few others. And we had an interest in, one, working with one another, but two, also doing things, in business that make a difference. Not trying to change the world kind of things, but doing our part. And there was an opportunity, so we jumped on it.
What was the opportunity? What gap did you see?
There was a particular gap with another partner that came about through a distribution channel, really, and that was with Karma Cola. They were looking for a good quality juice that aligned with their values, and we always had a great deal of respect for what they do and who they are as individuals, and we wanted to work with them. So
wow, what a great company. And for anyone that doesn't know about Karma Cola, they are the producers of a range of soft drinks that are made in ethical ways, and the people behind them are some of the absolute founding figures in the organics and sustainable business network in New Zealand.
They certainly are, yes.
Yeah, oh wow, cool. And so that link to those guys, how did that come about?
Through conversation, really. We had already begun our Earnest Juices, which is a cold press product, but only available through our cafes in Wellington. And we wanted to be able to create a long shelf life product that was rooted in sustainable practice and supported organic producers. And, that's exactly what they were looking for. And just through conversation and a lot of trial and error, really.
Cool. So you were running cafes in Wellington. Tell me about your cafes in Wellington.
Well, we have Milk Crate, still have Milk Crate as part of our partnership. It's something that was started by Ben over 10 years ago. I used to be involved in another partnership, and we had Matterhorn and another place down in Wellington. I've I've done a fair few things in my 17 years here in Wellington, but it's all been born out of really, really solid partnerships and learning to work with people in creative ways. Yeah.
Wow, so Matterhorn and Milk Crate, if people aren't from Wellington, they might not know as you modestly say that, but they're real institutions there. What are the commonalities in a hospitality business to trying to build it's kind of a fast-moving consumer good, hopefully, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hospitality businesses are cash flow businesses. You get used to doing as much as possible on very little. I've spent the last 2 nights sleeping in my business partner's lounge up here in Auckland. So this is how we run our business. We spend the money and the effort and the resources in the places that matter. Yeah.
And people, which I imagine hospitality, to be running people in a room full of perishable things is a pretty amazing thing. How does that translate to kind of building relationships?
Well, that's really where my interest has always been. Like I said, I've done a lot of different things in New Zealand in my time here. Only a fraction of it has been in the hospitality industry. I've been a producer, a project manager. I used to run an orchestra, and I would often joke with my board that most days I look like I should be running a cartel, but I'm running an orchestra. And really, for me, it is about connection with people, building relationships in community, coalition building, and leveraging partnerships. A lot of those skills for me were born out of necessity, growing up where I did, and doing a lot of the work that I was doing overseas on the streets. And you get used to dealing with people and reading situations and navigating your way through those in ways that make people feel like they respect you and they care and they want to work with you. Yeah.
Tell me about that. Where was that growing up, and how does that help you now?
Well, I grew up in a Mexican community east of Seattle, up in the Northwest. I mean, that's part of the other reason why I'm very interested in organics and a proponent of organics. Like most Mexican families, we were a farm working family, migrant farm workers. And I became very interested and involved very early on in my life in farm worker justice. Latino farm workers in the U.S. Have far greater, far higher rates of cancer than other populations, and they're exposed to cancer-causing agents and chemicals through pesticides and through the harvest work that we've typically done for a number of generations. So that's where my interest was early on. To be honest, I was also just a bit of a hustler growing up. I'd travel around the West Coast and buy and sell and do what I had to do to get to the next place. And that's how I, made a living for a fair few years of my life, and worked in Mexico City on the streets teaching homeless kids about, art and, just how to get by, really, in the really threatening environments that they were in. Yeah.
And how do you go from there to running an orchestra?
I think it was, the board recognized that the orchestra sector as a whole in New Zealand needed some freshening up, and someone with some fresh eyes, with a diverse background in cash flow business and hustling, really, connecting with communities and a knowledge of Wellington as well. I've only been there 17 years, but I wouldn't consider myself a New Zealander, but I'd certainly consider myself a Wellingtonian.
That's really interesting. In terms of, I listened to a fascinating thing on an NPR show that was saying that people who have been economic migrants or immigrants are kind of the ideal entrepreneur because they're self-selected people that are able to push further, go harder, get out of the comfort zone. What would your thoughts be on that?
Oh, I'd certainly agree. There's a small community of us Mexicans in Wellington, and we quite often say somos pocos pero locos. We are few, but we are crazy, but not crazy in a sort of deranged kind of way. But, we will do what we have to do to get by, to support our families, to support our communities, and, lift ourselves and one another up. And, we're used to having a lot less. And we realize the level of our privilege being here in such a wonderful country. So we have a level of responsibility that goes along with it.
That's a wonderful expression. Are there any other kind of like words you live by or words you come back to when things are tough? Yeah, most of them are pretty militant, but yeah, certainly. It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees, kind of sayings. Definitely. But all of those, really, it is just about hard graft for me and for many of the people around me. So you've been making earnest juices for a while that are wonderful but perishable.
Yes.
And then the idea came along to start this business. So tell me how you made it, because there are a couple of really cool parts to it, like the idea of the charitable give back at the heart of the business.
Yep, and we choose not to consider it charity. We've made a conscious decision to consider it our duty. And we really want to encourage other businesses to do the same. It's not something. A lot of people really want to do good, but they struggle through the year trying to make a buck, and they get to the end of the year and they go, shit, what discretionary, funds do we have to give back? And quite often there's very little. So what we've chosen to do is make it a cost of doing business. We've worked it into our cost of sales, our cost of goods sold, and it takes that discretion out of it for us. It's just a part of doing business.
And so what exactly is it that you have built in there? Describe to me the program with going into schools.
Well, first of all, we give a portion of every bottle sold goes directly to a couple of programs that we partner with. And that goes to digging veggie gardens. And we work with Garden to Table as well as Common Unity Project Aotearoa in Wellington. We support their efforts. They're the experts. They have the relationships within the communities, and they know what they're doing. So first and foremost, we just want to support them, but we also want to work alongside them. So we, 3 hours of every week, we each as individuals go in and work in these programs. We get our hands dirty in the gardens. We work in the kitchens and teach the kids how to cook with fresh produce, try and get them off the chicken nuggets and the like.
That's so cool. And do you take in kind of other people as well as the people in the business? Like, do you go and like sell the juices into a cafe and then say, oh, and by the way, you're meeting me at 9:00 at the local primary?
We do. Yeah. We actually do. We through our work in cafes and the hospitality industry, we know that hospitality workers typically have massive hearts. They're giving of themselves each and every day. And we want to take advantage of that and use them as a bit of a workforce as well, but quite often they're all too eager to come along and help out. So we connect them as well with these programs and with the schools directly. And now there are several groups and smaller cafes and restaurants that go of their own volition. They've established relationships with the schools and the programs, and we don't have to tell them where to be every week. They're there before we are.
That's so cool that they're passing on those skills of how to actually grow vegetables in a school environment. And I love the way that you guys also hero the growers in general. So looking at your website and finding out the provenance of your carrots, for example.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
That's very important to us as well. It's been important in everything we do as far as, with Matterhorn, procurement was a big part of what we did, procuring the, particular meats and products for use in the food, and the best booze, the best wine, and likewise with Milk Crate. And so that was a big part of what we wanted to do with creation of Almighty. Develop relationships with the growers. We get our organic apples from John Bostock's farms, his orchards in the Hawke's Bay. Carrots and beets come from the Lovets near Rakaya in mid-Canterbury. Black currants also come from the Canterbury region. The oranges come from Mexico, so there's a little bit of a connection there as well to Sonora.
Mm-hmm. And that's all organic, is that right?
All organic, that's right.
Yeah, from chatting to the Nice Box guys who are also in the orbit of the kind of Karma Cola family, the all good kind of family. They were also saying that sometimes the only way to get organic ingredients is to get them from overseas to be made at scale and consistency.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, and that's the case with our oranges and with the Fiji that we get from turmeric. The turmeric we get from Fiji. Yeah, it is the case.
What does it cost for a bottle of Almighty juice?
The recommended retail price is $5 for a 300 ml.
Wow. Yeah. And with organic ingredients and made in an ethical way, giving back to the community, beautiful branding and high quality kind of labels and bottles and stuff. How do you make a buck out of that? Because organic stuff is reasonably expensive.
To be honest, we need to sell a truckload, a truckload of juice. We want it to be accessible. We want good products to be accessible and available all over the country. There are far too many other shit products, really, that are have the lion's share of the market.
So is this like a drink less, drink better kind of like?
Yeah, it certainly is.
Kind of like you move off the Tui's and you move to a nice New Zealand-made craft beer, and you move off the Kerry orange juice and you move to a nice New Zealand-made real juice.
We'd like to think so, yes. Yes, certainly so. And we also would like to think that people want to support businesses that are doing their bit.
And how's it going? You guys have got some pretty big distribution partners.
Yeah, we do. And we've been growing fast. We're in well over 500 cafes and restaurants around the country. We're now into over 40 supermarkets and boutique grocers around the country as well. So, we're growing fast, and it is a growth model as opposed to a profit model for us, yep.
And at what stage do you get to a sustainable company with that kind of...
Hopefully very soon.
So you don't have to go to Australia and the US and, all of Asia in order to turn a dollar? Is it something that's within the reach?
It is something that's within the reach, but it's not what we're looking at the moment. We're really focusing on New Zealand. We want to do it well here before we consider that. Yeah.
What kind of things are you doing to build the brand and do that education piece so that people do look at the Almighty bottle and buy it?
First and foremost, the packaging and the brand. We've got a really great designer in Jared Bishop, who is also one of our partners. And he's created a really dynamic brand that we can have a lot of fun with. We do a lot of events. We partner a lot with others. But we want to be noticed. You'll see us around with pink polka dots. I drive a black car with bright pink polka dots on it. You can't miss that. So a lot of it at this stage is brand awareness, just getting the brand out there. We're not afraid to make ourselves look silly. We just want to be noticed right now and have people ask us these sorts of questions, ask us what we're up to and ask us about our story, and hopefully that's where we can hook them in.
What are your next steps with Almighty Juices? So you've got it into 500 stores around the country. You've got great distributors. You're building the brand. What are you up to at the moment? What's next?
Well, we're still very much in a brand awareness stage. We are creating as much content as we can, as efficiently as possible, and just getting it out to the far reaches of the country. At the moment, we're focusing on a couple of new channels and potential new channels, but definitely remaining domestic with our focus. Yeah.
And if someone's listening at the moment and they're thinking, man, I'd love to get involved, see what these guys are up to, buy a juice, where do they go and how can they help with giving back?
They can have a look at our website, almighty.nz. They can find us, just about anywhere that they see Karma Cola, and really ask at the cafe. They'll know how to get in touch with us. Most of them know us by name, but definitely check out the website, almighty.nz.
Wonderful. Well, Adàn, thank you so much for coming and seeing us today. Thank you, Jose Barbosa, for producing. And thank you for listening. If you're a fan of the Spinoff, please do jump onto iTunes and download the app.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. and brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tamaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.